Hello, everyone, and welcome in to another episode here of the RTI and VR2 Recruiting Podcast. I'm Nathaniel Rutherford, Managing Editor of RockyTopInsider.com, joined by Matt Ray and Brandon Martin of Vol Recruiting Reports here for our joint recruiting podcast. We're bringing you a second one, this one on the weekend. We'll kind of do these whenever. I thought it was appropriate to do it now because we've seen a ton of high school football at opening week. There were teams playing on Thursday, there were teams playing on Friday, and actually, as we're recording this on Saturday afternoon, there are even some teams playing right now with Tennessee commit four-star defensive tackle Dominic Bailey is playing right now, and apparently he's over on ESPN. He's putting up a pretty good show right now, so we may have a little bit of an update. But we wanted to talk about some of the guys who are Tennessee commits, Tennessee targets who've been playing here in this first week, and touch on a little bit of news as well, some guys putting Tennessee in their list of finalists. Last podcast, we discussed the commitment of Mordecai McDaniel, so we brought you that one. And the one before that one was talking about the commitment of BJ Ojulari. Tennessee doesn't have a commit for us to talk about this time, but we do still have some good news and some good notes to touch on here on the RTI and VR2 Recruiting Podcast. Matt, I'm going to turn to you first because you were over in Marietta on Thursday, speaking of the Thursday games, when Marietta opened up the season against Rome, and Marietta's in the highest classification of Georgia, so they're the top classification up there. Rome's in 5A, so they're a little bit smaller of a school, but still, Rome has lately been a very good team. They've won 2 state titles the past 3 years. I'm not entirely sure what their roster was like this upcoming season, but Tennessee's definitely recruited kids out of Rome over the last few years. But man, Marietta just had their way with Rome. Just watching some of the clips you guys were putting out from the game. Harrison Bailey was on target. It looked like he was moving around a little bit more. Of course, Eric Gilbert was dominant. So, Matt, I want to get your thoughts. I'll ask you a couple of questions here about what you saw at Marietta. First of all, Harrison Bailey. I think he was 19 of 30, nearly 400 passing yards, 5 touchdowns. Obviously, we all know he can throw the ball, he can sling it. That's never been the issue of his actual throwing ability. But one of the biggest knocks we've heard consistently from some of these analysts and guys has been, his mobility, his footwork in the pocket. I know it's just one game, and it was against, like I said, a team in a lower classification. But what did you make of Harrison Bailey? Not just as a passer, but as a guy who moves around back there. Because I saw he scrambled for a first down on Marietta's opening drive of the game. So what did you make of that? Did he look more improved? I saw people talking about he looks a little slimmer now and maybe even more in shape. So what did you make of Harrison Bailey in that first game?
It's generally going to be the same thing every night with Harrison. Most nights Marietta's probably going to throw around 38 to 40 times a game. Had control of it early, as everybody noticed, and were able to keep control of it. So they were able to have some luck on the ground with a really good little running back there in Amari Thomas. Mm-hmm. But for Harrison, yeah, he looked really good. I've never had an issue with his mobility, but I know that's been one of the biggest things. He scrambled around, he moved well in the pocket. I felt like on his toes a lot, which hitting the little screen passes that they hit and stuff like that is a big advantage. The biggest thing about Rome, and you talk about Rome being a little bit smaller school and what they have to offer. This was Rome's first loss at home since 2015. So that they haven't lost a game there at Barron Stadium since 2015. They're very fundamentally sound team, very well coached, and they get after you. They are coming with some form of a blitz every play. They do a lot of different variations of what they call the NCAA blitz. So they didn't get to Harrison a lot, get to him cleanly a lot anyways, but his ability to move around in the pocket, keep his eyes downfield, find his second and third guys was one of the more impressive things I felt about him. Eric wasn't a target of every single play, which people seem to think a lot. That wasn't the case. He has other guys there in Ricky White, Kamani Vidal out of the backfield, several younger guys rotating in. So for Harrison, he was able to spread the ball around and really utilize those playmakers, and that's what's going to make Marietta special this year. So I felt like week 1 in Rome, very hostile environment, later kickoff than normal. I felt like Harrison was in full control of the game, and I felt like you can't really ask much more from your quarterback than that.
I think you touched on it a little bit there with the offensive line. One of the biggest knocks of his team last year and kind of his whole high school career so far has been that, you know, he hasn't gotten a lot of protection, or, you know, very much protection at all from his offensive line. How did that look against Rome? Because, you know, obviously, well, I'll get to him in a second, but Tennessee commit B.J. Ojulari also plays on the offensive line. But, I mean, we talked about, I don't know if we talked about it or not, but I know I wrote an article about when, you know, Kenyatta Watson Sr. was talking about Harrison Bailey being, what he said, screwed over by the recruiting rankings. He talked about, you know, this offensive line kind of got him killed a little bit. So what did his offensive line look like in this game?
Offensive line was able to keep a clean pocket for a good portion of the night. This is an offensive line that's loaded with seniors now. They have a lot of maturity on the offensive line. It was a big improvement from last year. Gonna see the real test, I feel like, for this team this upcoming week when St. Joe's Prep in Pennsylvania comes down. It's going to be a national matchup, and it's going to be a really good matchup. Two different styles of football, and I think you're going to see what this offensive line's made of right there. As soon as the game ended with Marietta and Rome, the celebration took place midfield. They do a trophy ceremony. There was only about 5 minutes of celebrating, and then Coach Morgan immediately turned the attention to St. Joe's Prep, and you can tell that this is the one that they have been waiting on all off season. They played the national schedule last year. A lot of talk that the offensive line got exposed during that, and it kept coming back to, hey, this is our chance to show that we belong back. So this week's going to be a big test for that offensive line. So that one will be on ESPN. So you'll have another chance to see Harrison and Eric and BJ and the other guys down there play again on TV. So I would definitely tune into that. That'll be this Friday, I believe, at 8. So that's where you're going to find out a little bit more about Marietta's offensive line and what to expect moving forward, because they're not going to see a much better team than what they're going to see in St. Joe's Prep.
Perfect. That'd be good to keep an eye on it and to watch for Vol fans. You know, moving on a little bit here from Harrison Bailey to Tennessee's other commit on the team. What did you see from B.J. Ojulari? I saw some of the film and stuff you're putting out. I think you finished the game with, 7 tackles and a pass breakup. You mentioned he wasn't getting maybe credited for a ton of tackles necessarily, but he was getting in on a lot of plays. So what did you see from Ojulari?
The one thing, the most impressive thing about this Marietta team for me was the way that all 11 guys were at the ball all night long. You didn't see this last year with this team. Defense was another key issue. They lost some shootouts last year. Mm-hmm. This year, the defense motor was completely different. BJ was probably in on, honestly, 20 tackles, credited with 7, but he was probably in on 20 or 25 tackles. The most impressive thing to BJ is like what I talked about when he committed. You're getting a kid that plays Ironman football in the highest classification in Georgia. He came out with a little cramp in the third quarter. We talked about that in our interview session for our premium users. I just posted that about 2 o'clock Eastern time. And you're just talking about a kid that is going against a run-heavy offense, and you have him behind the gun, so you're having to get off the edge pretty often. And then a defense that's blitzing like crazy coming after you. You're having to sit back on your heels and block these guys. And his motor never stops. Midway through the third quarter, after the cramp, I think it's when Rome kind of kicked it into gear and made it 27-14. The vocal leader here coming to the sideline is BJ. It's BJ, and he's been over here. He's been getting treated for cramps, and he's the vocal leader at this point. Like, hey, it's time to shut this down, and that's exactly what they did. But he's the leader of that defense, in my opinion. And man, the buzz around BJ at Marietta they were so excited to see what he could do when he got to Tennessee and could focus on one position. So he's going to be really exciting to watch.
Awesome. That's exactly what I'm sure Vol fans wanted to hear, and it's good to know, because he's one that I'm very intrigued to watch. I think everyone kind of has their couple players in a class that they want to watch and know more about, and obviously when you have a quarterback committed, that's going to draw a lot of interest. In Harrison Bailey, it's probably going to get the most interest of anyone committed to Tennessee currently. But I'm really curious to see what BJ Ojulari does. He's a guy to me, I think, when we talked about it when he committed, I very much think he could shoot up recruiting rankings, depending on kind of, as long as he stays healthy and stuff. But like you said, he brings more than just what he does on the field as a player. I like his leadership, and I like what he does with his teammates. On to the next player on Marietta's roster that Vol fans are very interested in. You already touched on him a little earlier, Matt, and that is Eric Gilbert. Talking about, Harrison Bailey having a monster game. I mean, Gilbert did as well. He had, I think, 8 or 9 catches, 200-plus receiving yards, a couple touchdowns. Did he, a question for you, did he line up anywhere at all at tight end in the game? And did he play mostly as kind of wide receiver? As we know, Tennessee is recruiting him as a wide receiver, and now several other schools are too. So did he line up at all anywhere at tight end, or was he mostly receiver? And what did you take away from his performance?
He never put his hand in the dirt as far as a tight end role goes. He did come in almost like a H-back kind of role a time or two, but his hand was never in the dirt. It was majority of the day he was outside. He was at an X or a Z position, and he was running routes. Eric takes a lot of pride in blocking. That's not a problem for him, especially in high school. I mean, if he gets his hands on a kid, especially at the DB, it's over. If you saw Ricky White's touchdown run, Eric comes out, he stalk blocks the cornerback, gets his hands on him, and it's over. I mean, and I think Eric really feels he can thrive in that role, and I believe he can. I mean, if you look at what Gronkowski's done for the last 9 years at 6'6", 260 pounds, Eric's similar to that, and he moves well. So, I kind of see why Eric wants to play that role. He could have a big impact wherever he goes doing that. And I think any school that's recruiting him at this point would absolutely take him as a wide receiver.
You mentioned there, talking about Ricky White. He was a guy that I saw kind of getting some attention because of some of the plays he made in that game against Rome. Are there any other players, or I guess was he a guy that you would circle as maybe someone that Vol fans will want to keep an eye on, or is there anyone from either the rosters, Marietta or Rome, that you saw from that game that you would say, hey, maybe this is a guy that Vol fans kind of might want to keep an eye on, whether it's in the 2020 class or the 2021 class, or whatever it is. Were there anyone from Marietta or Rome that you saw and thought, hey, that's interesting. That's a guy who could be someone that might want to keep on the radar?
Most of you guys that are listening obviously follow recruiting very avidly. Mm-hmm. Marietta is this year's Grayson for Tennessee in a way. You'll see them involved with all these guys at some point. I would watch Jake Ray. I know you all are familiar with him. His brother, mm-hmm. Max, is an Ohio State commit. They were in state in Tennessee. They're in the middle of the state. I said Ohio State commit. He plays for Ohio State now. I'm sorry. But you have Jake. He looked a lot better. Jake had some trouble last year. Talked with some people about him. All that's behind him. Just some personal issues going on. All that's behind him. He looked like a different kid. He was excited to be there. He looked closer to what the ranking suggested he was this time a year ago. Marietta has a lot of young kids. So you've got Andre Stewart, that's 2022 kid, committed to Auburn. Obviously, probably firmest commitment right now. It's pretty fresh, but that's something that to watch moving forward, especially the way Tennessee does there. Probably the kid with the most upside that I would watch is Daniel Martin. He has a Tennessee offer. He is 6'5", probably about 215 pounds. Plays a little bit of wide receiver, a little bit of outside linebacker. Played DB last year as a freshman. He was another guy like BJ Ojulari who was in on every single play on defense, it seemed like. He was involved in every tackle or play in some sort of way. Just a really high motor and really good kid. And the kid that I've been home for a while is 2022 inside linebacker Carlos Cervantes. Mm-hmm. This kid come in last year, played different roles for Marietta. He's a little bit undersized, which is kind of holding him back, but he got to start over a senior this season. He is he's a difference maker in the middle of that defense. He's one of the reasons why people aren't running up the middle freely on Marietta anymore. So he's a guy to watch moving forward because he's probably at least got another growth spurt left, if not two. So if he can add another couple of inches, he's going to be a D1 talent without a doubt. So there's a lot of talent there at Marietta. And then Ricky White, Tennessee fans, you need to circle this kid. I do not think you've heard the last of him. He's electric. He can empty the game in a lot of different ways. A guy that's really close with Ramel Keaton made the statement to me on Thursday night on the sideline that Ricky White is Ramel Keaton's clone with a little bit of zig and zag. So, obviously he's not rated that high. He played at a smaller school last year. There was a lot of doubt because of that. He has a chance this year, and he's certainly making the best of that. So you need to keep an eye on Ricky White moving forward. I believe he had 2 touchdown catches and maybe a touchdown run on Friday night. So he's an exciting prospect to watch.
Well, before we get to Brandon, I have a good follow-up question here for you, Matt. Considering that good information you dropped at Ricky, he is currently committed to Michigan State.
Correct.
Look at his offer list. He doesn't have a ton of high-end offers. Do you think that's about to change? And do you think Tennessee gets involved with him? I won't ask about if they push for him or anything like that. I'm just curious. Do you think Tennessee will get involved with him at all?
I kind of feel like it's inevitable that Tennessee will get involved. Especially with the situation at receiver being the way it is, kind of in flux. But I could definitely see Tennessee getting involved. I know they probably want to evaluate. You can bet when they're allowed to hit the road that they're going to be frequent on the Marietta sideline. So what better time to evaluate them than in person? They know exactly what they're looking for. So it's easier to go watch game film, in my opinion. I think you'll see Tennessee at least extend an offer. I think you'll see several schools probably extend an offer, especially with the way these signing periods are. If you remember a kid 2 signing periods ago, I want to say 2018, name was Tyne Palmer from Archer High School down in Gwinnett. He is a similar kid. He had a few offers, was committed. He was committed to a school in the Midwest, I believe. And then everybody started going in after the first early signing period happened. And you almost have to feel like with a guy like Ricky being in this offense, going to put up big numbers, being a 1B option behind Eric because teams are going to double team Eric. So that's going to put a lot of load on Ricky in itself. So he's going to have a chance to really shine. He's playing with a Division I quarterback. He's playing in a high-powered offense. So I expect to see some teams jump in the mix, if not early, definitely sometime before December. I mean, it seems inevitable for him. He's going to blow up. Folks around that area are really excited to have him on that team.
We'll move along here to get to Brandon. He was at a game as well. And you guys, for anyone listening who still hasn't really checked out much about Vol Recruiting Reports, well, what are you doing? You need to go check them out right now. VolRecruitingReports.org is their site. They're at _VR2_ on Twitter. But you all have been to a lot of games this opening weekend. You're going to be at a lot more games moving forward this football season in high school. So be sure to check them out. They're going to have a lot of first-hand information, first-hand coverage for you of games that not only of Tennessee commits, but of Tennessee targets. And Brandon, that fits your description of the game you attended. You got to go see one of Tennessee's top in-state targets play in person on Friday. And that was Amari Thomas. We talked about him a little bit in the podcast, the last episode, talking about of guys we would like to see commit to Tennessee. I think we all said Jay Hardy, and you also threw in Amari Thomas, and I said, I don't think you could go wrong with either one of them being, kind of the number one guy you'd want to see commit in this class. So what was your overall takeaway from Amari in that game? And you said you also had another guy you wanted to throw out there as a name to keep an eye on too.
Look, I got to go see Amari, and I think my first impression, and I don't want to go overboard here, it was just wow. That is, Amari Thomas is one of the most athletic human beings I have ever seen at his size ever. 6'5", playing at about 305, and is it as good as his junior tape is, he looks better as a senior. I think he's I don't think he's lost weight. I think he's turned it into muscle. He looks a little leaner, but he is really moving well. The thing that separates Amari Thomas to me from a lot of the other defensive linemen or offensive linemen in this class is not just that he is a good player and a good technician and is able to take control of games and maul guys. It's just how explosive and how punishing his hits are. He doesn't just block people. He doesn't just hit people. He absolutely crushes people. There was a play, and I need to say this about Madison Academy. Madison has got Madison Academy is one of the best high schools in Alabama. They have spent, from the looks of the banners around the stadium, they've spent about the last 10 years either winning or playing for the state championship in their classification, and they usually play up a class. This is a quality program. This is a good team. This is the school that produced Jordan Matthews.
Right.
That played at Vanderbilt and did so well there. This is a quality program. They've got a few guys hurt. They were playing a little undermanned, and Briarcrest is really good. Now, all of that said, there was one play. They wound up, one of the plays that stood out to me, it was one of the first plays that we put up on the website. Briarcrest runs a little tunnel screen out to the left, and the offensive line just goes into pass protection. And I don't know how else to. Amari Thomas just spiked a kid like it was one of the most stunning things I've seen. The kid who's coming on the blitz just almost bounced when he threw him down, and he was smaller than Amari, but this is still a kid playing on a team that figures to be in the discussion for their state championship. It's not low end talent to sneeze at. That's an impressive, and I was just shocked. I was shocked seeing that. He gets out well and blocks in space very, very well. He's not just a blocker, he's a devastating blocker. The people, he just crushes people. And I think that's the thing that I enjoy the most about him. A lot of teams are looking at him as a defensive lineman, and he absolutely has the ability to do that. At Briarcrest, he's actually playing a 3-4, and he's playing end in their 3-4. He's a good enough athlete. He's not playing the nose at that size. He's playing end in their 3-4 scheme and is quick enough to play it. He made some good plays. He made some good plays in this game. I kind of like what we had and what we talked about with Reggie Grimes last week. I think Madison Academy did a wise thing and ran away from him. They just ran to the other side and said, we're going to take him out of the play by making him run things down from behind. The problem was he was getting through double teams and still chasing guys down from behind. And to see him doing that to a very mobile quarterback who is a Division I baseball talent. The quarterback at Madison has got I believe he's got a baseball offer to Clemson, I believe. Don't quote me on that for sure, but I believe that was what I was told. I know he's got a baseball offer. It's pretty impressive. I mean, you're talking about running down another Division I athlete, but he's 305 pounds doing it. Didn't get a lot of time on the field. Amari told me after the game it was a bad headache. I don't know if he took a shot in the head. Don't really know what happened. At first we thought it was an arm. Apparently when they were doing that, it was part of the concussion protocol, which he passed and he was fine. So we didn't see a lot of him. They didn't need to bring him back in. They had the game well in hand. Briarcrest wound up winning the game 44-7 and just dominated. But there was no need to put him back in. They weren't going to put him back in and risk getting him hurt, especially with it under control. But in the time that you got to see him, he is as good as advertised. Just extraordinarily athletic for his size. And I know a lot of teams have fallen in love with him as a defensive lineman, and I believe that Amari Thomas would be a great defensive lineman. But this kid is on another level playing on the offensive line. Tackle, guard, wherever you wanted to put him. I think, to me, I think he's even better there than he is on the defensive line, and I think he's fantastic on defense. I don't know what he would be at Tennessee. I don't know if they would use him as a nose or as a defensive end because he's athletic enough and big enough to play either one. I'm so impressed, and again, what sticks out is just the way he delivers a blow every time he gets in contact with somebody. There are no soft engagements. There are no just kind of half getting involved. When he hits somebody, he hits somebody. And people just go flying. You don't see guys that do this often, and it's incredible to watch. I had a chance to talk with some other folks who were at the game, and I heard a name, Rodney Harmon. They kept telling me, well, you guys need to look at Rodney. You need to look at Rodney. And I had looked at a few of my video clips, and I had noticed one of the other guys standing out that wound up being Rodney. Rodney's also a senior at Briarcrest. Now, up to last year, Rodney had played right tackle. This year, they moved him to left guard. He's playing beside Amari at left guard. But when I started looking back through my film, he really has a lot of plays where he's popping, where he's making good plays, where he's coming off the film, he's getting a hold of guys and just driving guys. They had Jabari Small had a really long run at one point, and the run started on about the 20-yard line, and Rodney blocked his man all the way down to the 10.
Wow.
His tape from his junior year to his senior year is night and day. He's lost baby fat. I don't think he's lost a lot of weight, but he's lost baby fat. He looks bigger and stronger and more muscular. He's still a big kid. They've got him listed about 310, about 6'3", 310. And again, he's played tackle for Briarcrest the last few years, played right tackle, and is very athletic. But at guard, he moves extraordinarily well for a guard. Pulls very well. He's comfortable in space from all that time playing tackle, but is a punishing blocker. He sprung a long run for Jabari Small in the second quarter, where he got a hold of a man and just washed him completely out of the play. They wound up tackling Small at about the 3. They come back the next play. He engages the defensive tackle in front of him, pushes him down, comes back across the formation and washes a linebacker out, and Small goes in without getting a hand laid on him. He really popped off on film to me, and I was impressed. Right now, he's only rated as a 2-star guard, or he's only rated as a 2-star prospect by 247. But I think this might be a case of being one of those late bloomers. He's got some D1 offers. He's going to get more attention because he's playing beside Amari, and people are going to come see Amari. They're going to come see Jabari Small. This is a kid to watch. I think that he could be, I think a good comparison to Tennessee fans might be a guy like a Jarius Abercrombie a few years ago in Pruitt's first year that no one had heard of, and suddenly, hey, this is a 3-star guard that's huge and moves well, and we're excited to have on the roster. I don't know that Tennessee will look at Rodney, but he fits the mold of what Pruitt is lacking in guards. And I think he might be a sleeper. I think this is a kid that, between the position change and the physical changes in his body, what I have of him as a senior looks dramatically better than what he did as a junior. Looks totally different. And then, of course, Jabari Small is also the running back. He's a hard commit to Ole Miss right now. Mm-hmm. We know Tennessee had wanted him. With Tennessee potentially moving Jeremy Banks to linebacker, you wonder if we had talked about Tennessee would maybe like a second running back anyway. You wonder, have you given up on that? Do you want to keep trying to go there? We know this staff, if they really, really like somebody, they don't give up on them. I didn't get an opportunity to talk to Jabari. They had a long bus ride back from Huntsville to Memphis that night. I was only able to grab the interview with Amari before they had to head out. We're going to be covering another Briarcrest game this season. I want to try to find time to go down to Memphis and watch him play. I wonder about Jabari. He had a good game. He scored the first points of the game. He had a 65-yard on a punt return that was spectacular. He had a couple of other long runs, very complete back. To be as small as he is, man, he runs with power. He will lower his head and pop you when he hits you. He delivers a blow as a running back. I don't know if Tennessee's done there. I know he's committed. Again, I know he's committed to Ole Miss, but I don't know if Tennessee's back in play there or not. I'm going to try to reach out and find out. Tennessee is firmly in play for Amari, though. He did say that Tennessee is the team recruiting him the hardest right now.
Well, that's good to know and good to hear because, I mean, like you said, we all talked about him last week. We're all big fans of him. And I think it's interesting you talked about that as good as he is on the defensive line, do you think he might even be a better offensive lineman? I know at first, or for a long time there at least, most recruiting services, he was listed as an offensive lineman. Then he ended up telling a bunch of other recruiting services, hey, no, I'm getting this offer from this school to be a defensive lineman. I remember seeing his tweet to, I think it was 247 Sports, months and months ago, that the offer he got from Tennessee was as a defensive lineman, and I mean that's what he's listed at now as recruiting services. So I'll be very intrigued to see, like you said, if Thomas, if he plays defensive line, if maybe if he wants to play offensive line, what he's going to do. I also think Rodney Newsom's interesting, looking at his offer list on his Twitter account, because it's not updated very accurately on the recruiting sites. I mean, like you said, he has some offers from like Southern Miss, from UAB, from Louisiana Monroe. I think he has one from Austin P. He doesn't have, a lot of offers, like you said, from Power 5 schools. But he does have offers from some FBS schools, and I'll be kind of intrigued to see what happens with him. There's always going to be guys whose names pop up on the recruiting trail. Once the season starts in high school, there are going to be guys who kind of fall down the list. But you look at this time last year, we all kind of thought, or I guess, I know I personally did, and a lot of the chatter was still of a guy like Charles Moore, who was kind of high on Tennessee's list, and then his senior year didn't go all that great. They're just, and he kind of slipped down. Now I think he's actually in the junior college ranks, because I don't think he qualified for the school he ended up, committing and signing with. But there's always going to be a change, because you look at this time last year, there was a little bit of chatter about Ladarius Cox, but there wasn't really as much as there ended up, being about him flipping to another school. There definitely wasn't a whole lot of talk about Lakia Henry, the 4-star junior college linebacker who's committed to Tennessee, about him going to flipping away from Tennessee, going to another school. So things are going to change. I don't expect there to be a ton of attrition in this class for Tennessee.
Doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, but there will be at least one or two, maybe 3 guys who are currently committed who just won't be part of this class, whether it's because it was a mutual parting of ways, whether it was another school showing them more interest in Tennessee passing on them, or another school coming in and legitimately flipping them, and Tennessee missing out on a guy they wanted to keep. So there will be a couple of guys in this class who won't be part of this class come February, but I don't think you'll see a ton in this one. Go ahead, Brandon.
I gotta say, the position change for Newsom,
mm-hmm.
He looks like a different player at guard. He does not look like the same kid that is playing in his junior tape. It's that drastic. And he plays nose tackle for them on defense and made a couple plays there. But I think as an offensive guard, he really he moves so well at that spot, because he is big, he is strong, he is athletic. But they're letting him pull, and he looks more comfortable at guard. I don't know how else to say it. He looks like a different player. It was really impressive and really eye-opening for me to see him. And when I went back and started looking through my film and looking through my clips, and he just keeps popping off on tape. Again, Tennessee may not take him. I think Tennessee's probably done on the interior offensive line, but he's a name to watch. I think he could wind up being a surprise for people down the stretch.
Well, interesting. I mean, both you guys have given a few names here to keep an eye on and to put on the radar for Tennessee. One that he was already on my radar because he included Tennessee in his top 10 back in early May. But I was a little surprised. I'll admit it. I was a little surprised on Friday when he released his 5 finalists and Tennessee was included. That is 5-star defensive end Desmond Evans, who plays for Lee County High School over at Sanford, North Carolina, which is about 45 minutes or a little under 45 minutes away from UNC's campus. His final 5 included Tennessee, Florida, Virginia Tech, North Carolina, which I just mentioned, and South Carolina. Matt, he to me seems, and I'm glad to get your opinion on this too, Brandon, before we close out the podcast. But Matt, he to me seems like a heavy North Carolina lean. It helps that campus is, like I said, it's about 40 minutes away from where he lives right now, over in Sanford, which is it's a kind of a smaller area between two of the bigger cities over in that area of North Carolina. But he's visited North Carolina's campus somewhere between, I think, somewhere between 7 and 10 times in just 2019 alone. He's been there well over a dozen times, throughout his recruitment. But he's a guy that it seems like, I've not had a chance to talk to him. I've tried to reach out to him and I haven't heard back from him. But he does seem like he likes Tennessee's coaching staff. Like I said, he had Tennessee in his top 10 back in May. They survived the cut of cutting down from 10 to 5 here in August. He eliminated teams like Alabama, Clemson, Duke, NC State, and Ohio State. So obviously I think some of those might be teams that maybe moved on a little bit from him, but he's a legit, really high-rated guy. Even if he doesn't remain a 5-star, I think he's a really very high potential, top 50 type of player. Matt, is there any way Tennessee could pull him away from the Tar Heels? Because to me, it would take. I think with his Final Five at listing there, I think that means at least Tennessee's probably going to get an official visit from him. But to me, it would take North Carolina having a crappy season, which, that's more than capable of happening with a new head coach coming in and just the ACC the way it is in general. I haven't looked at North Carolina's schedule, but I just don't see them having, an amazing season. But I think it'd take a combination of them kind of having a crappy season, maybe him looking at what his role could be on that defense and saying, I'm not sure I would fit in there well. And it would also take Tennessee having, a good to maybe better than expected season, and them showing what the defensive ends and stuff do, and their defense is saying, hey, this is how we can use you. Because he's a guy who's 6'6" and 240, and he still looks like he could add another 30 to 40 pounds and still be very athletic and do what he does. Or maybe he, kind of stays where he is and adds maybe 5 to 10 pounds and plays as an outside linebacker. But either way, he's a guy that I think is a very, very high ceiling prospect who needs to learn a little bit. He's not even 17 yet. I think he turns 17 in like a month. So he's 16 years old as a senior in high school, and he only started playing football, I think, 3-4 years ago maybe. So he's a guy who has, I think, still a lot to learn. But man, athletically, he is a force. In 10 games last year for Lee County, 69 tackles, 25 tackles for loss, 12 sacks, 16 quarterback hurries, forced a fumble, he recovered a fumble and returned it for a touchdown, and he blocked a punt. And he also plays basketball, averages 11 points and 6 rebounds a game as a junior for Lee County. So he just is a really good athlete, a two-sport athlete. Matt, is there any way that he doesn't end up at North Carolina? Because I'd be kind of surprised if he doesn't sign with the Tar Heels, because it just seems like, I say follow the visits. And I know, like I said, it helps that they're 40 minutes away from where he lives, but man, he's been there a ton of times. And he's been in Tennessee once recently, kind of. He went last year when Tennessee hosted Alabama in Neyland Stadium. But I just would be surprised if he doesn't end up at UNC.
Yeah, like you said, it's good for Tennessee that they keep making the cut. I think a lot of that has to do with Tennessee was one of the early schools to offer him. So that definitely helps a lot. That'll keep you there. That means a lot to kids, and I don't doubt a bit that this staff's not recruiting him and probably recruiting him hard. He's a kid that keeps things quiet. But the thing is there's not a lot to put out there when you're visiting North Carolina every weekend that's available to visit. And if you go all the way back to 2016 when he first started picking up, that's been the trend forever. And granted, yeah, it's 40 minutes from home, but in 2019 he's not been anywhere else that he's been to South Carolina once. So yeah. Everywhere else is North Carolina. Tennessee got him, like you said, back for Alabama. They need to at least get him on campus one more time, and then for an official visit if they really want to have a chance in this one. You could get somebody with 3-4 visits, but you have a guy that's 40 minutes away from North Carolina's campus, has been there probably 40 times by the time the season ends, is probably the top priority on the board for North Carolina. They probably feel like they absolutely cannot miss on this guy, that it would be devastating to this recruiting class that's so crucial to their rebuild. So it would take a lot of things to go in Tennessee's favor for them to get in, to jump over them, I feel like. You got to feel like Tennessee's probably running second or third there. I think the second spot would be between them and South Carolina. But it's going to be really tough, and he's not a kid that releases really any information. I've never had any luck getting anything out of him other than a few words here and there. So I think a lot of that comes back down. Normally, if a kid's really interested in Tennessee, they're more apt to give you something, at least respond and at least have an open conversation with you about it. They may not want to do an interview every time you want to do an interview or feel like something's pertinent that you need to get out about them, but you can at least get a response back and forth with them. It just seems kind of cut and dry right now, and it's going to take a lot to shake that up to get him away from North Carolina.
Brendan, is there anything else you want to add to that?
I agree with Matt. I mean, you get a kid who is that important to North Carolina. I mean, Mack Brown, let's not forget, Mack Brown's a heck of a recruiter in his own right. But this is his top priority. It has to be his top priority. They're trying to get this rebuild done. He's the kind of kid you can build a program around. And clearly there's a lot of interest there. But I will say this. And we all know this, if you can get a kid on campus for an official visit and he's actually listening, there's always a chance. You have to make that cut. You have to get them on campus. We've seen stranger things happen. Maybe North Carolina really does come out and struggle this year, and I think and I respect Mack Brown as a coach, but I think there's a good chance they could come out and struggle pretty mightily this year, depending on how much he wants to change on offense and defense and how their personnel are. They could have a really bad year. He could wind up looking at the Tar Heels and go, I don't know that I want to be bad for 2 years and hope we get everything right that third year. Tennessee has a good season. Maybe he goes, this one's on the right track. It'll be interesting to watch. Another caveat to that one may be the interest from South Carolina and Tennessee, because if Reggie Grimes were to announce, I think these two guys would play similar roles. Whoever loses out on Reggie Grimes is really probably going to wind up doubling down trying to pull this off.
Yeah, I could absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, I think that'll be Tennessee's. We talked about it a little bit in the last podcast. Tennessee's defensive line board it's interesting. It's going to be kind of interesting. That one might change, maybe more than it's really going to depend on kind of when and I'll say if too, but when guys like Tyler Barron and Jay Hardy and Amari Thomas kind of all decide they want to make their announcements. Amari's a guy who isn't scheduled to make his announcement until January 4th, the All-American game. But I mean, what if he's a guy that signs during the early signing period and then doesn't make it public until then? Because that's definitely a thing that we've seen kids do. I mean, Tennessee had that with Jameer Johnson back in the first early signing period with Pruitt and them. I mean, he signed with Tennessee during the early signing period, and then I think came out like 4 days or a week later, something like that, and said, "Hey, by the way, I did this," and didn't make it public until just now. But you have Amari who's he has at least a set date at least of when he's supposed to announce, but Hardy and Barron both haven't had any kind of announced time where they're going to do it. You would think, I mean, Hardy said he's going to wait. He's talked about waiting kind of either till mid-season or after his senior season's over, or maybe even up until January. I mean, he doesn't really have a time table doesn't really seem. He did just trim down his list of top 16 to a finalist list, so we do have that at least where he's got it trimmed down a lot more now, and he does seem like he's maybe accelerating the process a little bit. But we still know Tyler Barron's a guy who also put out a top 5 list of 5 finalists, but I don't know really if he's super close to making a public decision or not. So that defensive line board is very much going to depend on what those in-state guys do. But then, like we said, Tennessee has a lot of other guys on the defensive line they're targeting. I mean, I still think there's a chance they get back involved with Rogers, the kid that's committed to Kentucky. There's Trevon Ripka. Does Tennessee, have room for him? Do they still keep recruiting him hard and coming after him even though he's committed to Kentucky? There's also, we didn't do this starting this podcast until after he'd already committed, but Corbett Mims is a guy who, committed to Arkansas State, but he started getting interest from other SEC schools, and if he goes out and has a strong senior season, I mean, Ole Miss and Tennessee were kind of pushing for him, and he was getting interest from a few other SEC schools, so that could be a guy to keep an eye on. There's just a lot to, like I said, Reggie Grimes, Desmond Evans. I mean, there's just a lot of guys to
Octavius Oxendine.
Yeah, Oxendine's one too. That it seems like Kentucky's also a major player for him. So there's a lot to keep an eye on with Tennessee's defensive line recruiting in their board right now. But I think that'll be where we'll end this podcast. We've already gone quite a while here and ended up going a little longer than I expect us to, but that's fine. I think Matt and Brandon gave some really good information about of Tennessee commits and targets they got to see firsthand. And they're going to see a lot of guys firsthand, so I'm sure we'll try to do a podcast kind of the end of the week every week. But we'll try to keep doing at least 2 every week if we can. But I'm sure we'll at least have one at kind of end of the week to kind of look at where these guys have been, where Brandon, Matt, and some of the other guys at Vol Recruiting Reports, Dale Dowden, and some of the other ones that go to these other games and put out the clips and stuff of what they're watching. But it'll be very interesting to keep an eye on all these guys and see what you guys see every single week, and then also talk about other stuff. We'll try to do some kind of mailbag question stuff, or have you guys ask questions and we'll answer it in a podcast. So we've got a lot of different formats, a lot of different things we're going to do. Also bringing on different guests, whether it's a kind of a national recruiting person or whether it's a prospect themselves. We got a lot coming down the wire for you guys, so we appreciate you all listening in for this episode. If this is your first time listening, we really appreciate you listening and making this your first time. If you want to listen to some more, there's a multitude of ways for you to find us. You can go to RockyTopInsider.com, click on the podcast tab there, and you can find that way where we have our RTI and VR2 Recruiting Podcast. We also have the regular RTI podcast that I do with Ben McKee, RockyTopInsider.com. We are on Apple Podcasts, so if you have an Android device, you can listen to us that way, and whatever podcast app you use there. We also are on YouTube. If you search Rocky Top Insider on YouTube, that's a new way for you to experience all our podcasts as well. And there's, like I said, there's just the website. We can listen to it straight from the web page there, or you can download it from that web page. And there's also our RSS feed. And we have just a bunch of ways for you guys to listen to the RTI podcast and the RTI and VR2 Recruiting Podcast. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Rocky Top Insider for all of those. And Matt, I'll let you plug where everybody can find all the stuff for Vol Recruiting Reports.
All right, guys. So, yeah, we covered a lot this week. We'll be back again next week. 3 games next week for us. Currently trying to work them out. We had Dixon County scheduled in case Trevon Ribka had committed there. So, Brandon will be going somewhere else in that area. I'll probably go back to Marietta one more time because they're playing St. Joe's Prep. See those guys from Pennsylvania, see what's going on there in case Tennessee does, because that is a national team, and see if Tennessee gets involved with anybody there. Dale is going to Troup County to see Auburn commit Kobe Hudson, who Tennessee has been off and on with, and then 4-star defensive lineman Andy Boykin. Tennessee seems to be a little bit more in gear with Boykin right now, according to him. But you can find all of our stuff at Vol Recruiting Reports on Instagram, at Vol Recruiting Reports on Facebook, and then Twitter gets all of the information first, and it is _VR2_, and then again for the website, volrecruitingreports.org. And then for our premium subscribers, you know that you have a new notebook up. Well, you will have a new notebook up shortly. You have a new video interview up with BJ Ojulari and a new premium video up yesterday with Eric Gilbert, and then there will be one later in the week with Amari Thomas. It's $2 a month, filled monthly, can cancel anytime. Get quite a bit of bang for your buck. We do at least 2 insider notebooks a week. It's probably going to be even more than that right now with the season in full swing. So you're going to want to sign up and at least check it out because, again, I mean, it's $2. You can cancel anytime. So at least give us a try. Give us your feedback and at least join our weekly recruiting chat one time and see what you take away from it. So other than that, just be looking for us moving forward.
Yeah, the premium stuff is well worth it. Like you said, just $2. I mean, that's cheaper than a cup of coffee at most places. That's cheaper than a lot of just. I mean, that's a really good deal. You're only paying that, like you said, monthly. So go chip into those guys. It is well worth it. The guys, both Matt, Brandon, like I said, they have other guys too, like Dale and several other people that help out with all the stuff they do at volrecruitingreports.org and at @_VR2_ on Twitter. Be sure and check them out. You guys are great. All you listeners listening along have been great. If you have any questions, anything from this podcast or any other ones we've done in the past, or anything you'd like us to talk about in a future podcast, let us know on Twitter. Like I said, they're @_VR2_. We're at Rocky Top Insider, and we're also at RTI Recruiting if you want to ask on that Twitter handle as well. But thank you all for listening. Until next time, this has been another episode of the RTI and VR2 Recruiting Podcast.